Hello aspirants, welcome to IAS Icons by Unacademy. This is me Shubham Sardhalia and we are continuing with our discussion for chapter 4 of class 6th NCERT. I request you guys to join me at the earliest so that we can start with our today's discussion. So guys, as a UPSC aspirant, since you're preparing for this UPSC exam, it shows that you want to qualify this examination, you're watching these videos. So it means that you are seriously preparing for this examination to make your preparation more substantiate, more guided, in a more guided way. You need to enroll with us in our courses at Unacademy. We at Unacademy are offering you courses with the help of which you will be able to qualify well in this examination. Start your preparation today with India's largest learning platform. If you ask me why Unacademy, sir, we offer you widest choice of educators. We give you flexibility to change your course. We provide you end-to-end preparation. We are giving you a comprehensive notes, daily answer writing, live mentorship, dedicated doubt solving sessions. So in short, anything and everything that you require to qualify this examination will be given. You can start your preparation with India's best educators, which you see on your screen. My name is Shubham Sardhalia. I'll be your educator and mentor for the civil service examination. So while you go and appear in UPSC examination, the most important part is of mains. So you need to practice the answer writing. You need to master this art of answer writing when it comes to UPSC mains. Only then you will be able to qualify it. So you can subscribe to our mains test series for just rupees 14,990. This much of amount you have to pay and you will be able to appear for these tests, where you will get 30 full-length sectional tests. You will be given superior model answers. There will be live analysis sessions, customized feedback and evaluation will be given. So in short, you will be able to practice and simultaneously you will be able to know that where are the areas I need to improve. So you should enroll for this. Just like that, we are giving you test series for optionals also. If you want to score more than 325 in UPSC optionals, you should opt for our test series. We are offering you anthropology, pub, geography and mathematics optional test series. Most important thing, you need to enroll with us in our plus and iconic subscriptions, because here with the help of this subscription you will be able to get more than 20% discounts for a limited period. Normally what you get is 10% discount, but here we are giving you 20% discount. So you need to pay only 80% and 20% you will be getting as discount if you use this code IAS Icons. So you need to remember this code and you need to remember this, that this is the limited period offer which will be applicable till 30th September only. So our batches are starting soon with the top faculty. Our bilingual batches are starting, so you should enroll in them. And for all those students who find it difficult to pay the entire amount at once, we are offering you 0% EMI option. Call on this number and avail the opportunity of 0% EMI. So we'll be starting with our discussion of history class 6th. So today's discussion will be about chapter number 4 of history. So what is this chapter number 4 of history? Can you please let me know? We'll be studying about chapter number 4 of history, whose name is what books and burials tell us. So I talked about with you, like from where we got to know that how these things in the past were. There were some certain sources. For example, we had sources like manuscripts, inscriptions. Simultaneously, we got certain more history sources like books and burials. So in this lecture we'll talk about the another important sources of our history, that were the books that were written and the burials. Burial is a place where people who died were buried. So these burials tell us lot of things. So we'll try to understand. So this is our chapter 4. What books and burials tell us, we'll understand about it. Sir, India houses the oldest book in the world. Vedas are considered to be the oldest books in the world, and there are 4 of them: the Rig Veda, the Sam Veda, the Yajur Veda, the Atharva Veda. I hope you know all these names: Rig Veda, Sam Veda, Yajur Veda and Atharva Veda. Out of these 4, Rig Veda is considered to be the oldest, which was composed some 3500 years ago. So Rig Veda as a book was composed 3005 years ago, which made it the oldest book in the world. Rig Veda included more than 1000 hymns which were known as Sukta. So we need to have the detail of these small pieces of information. Good evening, Kirti, how are you? So you can be asked questions like this, that what is Sukta as per ancient history? So Sukta, which meant well said. This Sukta was the term used for the hymns that were there in our Rig Veda. Good evening, Aparna. How are you? I am glad that you guys are joining on regular basis. We are having back-to-back 4 classes a day, and I find both of you in all the 4 classes, and this really makes me happy. So thanks for being with us. So these Rig Veda included more than 1000 hymns. Bhajans we can consider them. So these hymns, we call them suktas, or the exact translation was well said, that what you are saying is rightly said. So these hymns were in the praise of various gods and goddesses. So these hymns, these bhajans, these suktas that were written in the Rig Veda were in the praise of gods and goddesses. So we can understand from this point that Rig Veda had mention of gods, because we were praying for gods and goddesses. These gods were especially important. These 3 gods were especially important. So again, it is important to note down that we find the mention of Agni, the god of fire, Indira, the warrior god, and Soma, a plant from which a special drink was prepared. So Agni, Indra, and Som, these 3 gods, they find their mention in the Rig Veda. This is what is being told to us in our NCERT books. Rig Veda was written in Vedic Sanskrit. We need to remember, sir, this Vedic Sanskrit is different from the Sanskrit that we have been reading. You must have, or a few of you must have studied about Sanskrit as a language in your school. So the Sanskrit that you study in school, the Sanskrit that you see around you is different. Rig Veda was written in a different form of Sanskrit. We call it as Vedic Sanskrit. And this Rig Veda was more recited and heard rather than read. Normally what happens is, thank you, Aparna. So normally what happens here is, books are read. So books are written so that people can read out. But Rig Veda was one such book that wasn't read initially, but that was recited. Somebody used to read out that book for other people, and somebody used to recite that book, and other people were hearing that. It was written down several centuries after it was composed and printed less than 200 years ago. So what was happening here was, in initial days, Rig Veda was actually spoken. So it was like that, it was not written anywhere. One was reciting, other were hearing. Then they could learn from that person. They would just recite it in front of other people, and ultimately by reciting only, people were memorizing, people were remembering this Rig Veda. So it was written much later when it was composed. Rig Veda tells us about various things. It tells about the battles fought for land and cattle. We'll talk about it. The battles were fought for land and cattle. So, for example, you see today also when battles are fought for land, and cattle was one of the most precious possession of people of these times. People in these times had the possession as land and cattle. So battles were fought for these. People met in assemblies and discussed war and peace. They used to meet up in various assemblies. They used to discuss things about war and peace. Wealth was obtained. If somebody was fighting war, so there was some wealth. That wealth could be in the form of cattle. The wealth could be in the form of land also. So the wealth obtained was distributed among the leaders, priests, and the people. We need to remember that wealth that was attained was first kept by the leaders, some portion was given to priests, and rest of the wealth was distributed among the people of the area. Initially, Rig Veda was not in written form, I just told you right now only, but passed orally. So by reciting, by speaking, it was transferred from one individual to individual. Knowledge passed on this way is known as Shruti. We need to remember the term Shruti with reference to Rig Veda means, so this practice of passing knowledge about Rig Veda by speaking word to word and transferring on in from one person to other was known as what? It was known as Shruti. And who was doing it? There were gurus, there were Vedic teachers who were actually doing it. So these Vedic teachers, they were doing it, and they took great care to make sure that they were pronouncing each and every word correctly so that the students can memorize it. Since the book was not written, so teachers had to take care that whatsoever they are speaking, every word they speak has to be pronounced clearly, has to be pronounced properly, because ultimately the hymns, the words that students will hear, they'll memorize that only, and a small mistake while reciting can change the meaning of this entire Rig Veda. So I told you that Rig Veda was written in Vedic Sanskrit, and the Sanskrit which we use today is different. Scholars have found many similarities between Sanskrit and European languages. We'll talk about it many times in this entire course of history. So Sanskrit finds its similarity with languages like Latin, English and German, and it is said that these languages, or majority of the languages of the world, are derived from Sanskrit only. So with the fact that Sanskrit had certain things in common with Latin, German and English, the scholars came to the conclusion that Sanskrit belongs to Indo-European group of language. Indo-European, the languages spoken somewhere between India and Europe. Other languages like Hindi, Kashmiri, Sindhi, etc. belong to the same group. So languages that were spoken somewhere from Indian subcontinent to European areas, this was known as Indo-European group of language. It included Latin, English, German, Sanskrit, Hindi, Kashmiri and even Sindhi also. So there were certain languages those were used, but this Rig Veda was written in Sanskrit or Vedic Sanskrit only. The most earliest evidences of manuscript were found somewhere 150 to 180 years ago in Kashmir. The page you see here written on birch bark. Remember first chapter I told you, birch is a type of a tree whose bark is considered soft so that things can be written on it. So the first manuscript, or we can consider it as the first page of Rig Veda, was written somewhere 150 to 180 years ago in Kashmir, and it was found in Kashmir. So you can see this was Rig Veda written. It was used to prepare one of the earliest printed texts of Rig Veda, as well as its English translation. So the Rig Veda that we read today, the Rig Veda that we have today, that was translated and written into English, was based on this manuscript that was obtained in Kashmir. So this manuscript is till today preserved in a center in Pune in Maharashtra. So battles were fought for land, which was important. See, land was very important because it was used as pasture. Since the term pasture is here, pasture is chara on which animals feed. So this is clear that they had domesticated, or they started domesticating animals, and we studied it in earlier civilizations only, that we saw the traces in Indus Valley civilization also. People were growing hardy crops that ripened quickly, such as barley. So what was happening? Barley was grown by peoples. So battles were fought for what? Battles were fought for land. Battles were fought even for water, on water sharing. We also see the modern types of modern form of this water sharing problem today. Also, we have water sharing problems within states. We have water sharing problems within countries also. So during the Vedic times also, we saw these problems. And even the battles were fought to capture people. Aparna is asking which language is oldest. So Aparna, you have to answer this yourself. See, I told you that the oldest text was Sanskrit, and it was written in Vedic Sanskrit. Oldest text was Rig Veda, and it was written in Vedic Sanskrit. So Vedic Sanskrit has to be the oldest language. So it's the Sanskrit which is the oldest language. Then after the wars were fought, there was wealth obtained. So as I told you that certain wealth was kept by the leaders, some was given to the priests, and rest was distributed among the people. Some of this wealth was used to perform yajnas or sacrifices. We need to remember this also, and many times questions related to these are directly asked in the examination. So people in Vedic age performed sacrifices and yajnas. Yes, they did, because it is clearly mentioned in NCERT that wealth that was obtained was distributed among the leaders, was given to priests, was distributed among the common people, and a certain portion of it was used to carry out yajna or sacrifices, which were the offerings made into fire. So this offering was made into fire. There are two groups who are described in the term. There were two groups of people. One were the priests, who were often called as Brahmins. So who were these Brahmins? They performed rituals. They performed rituals like they were performing sacrifices. So they were called as priests or Brahmins. Apart from that, there were the another class of people who were called the Rajas. So don't confuse the Rajas just like the kings of dynasties. These were not the kings. They didn't have the right to collect taxes. They didn't maintain the armies. Arey Aparna bachche, I told you n number of times. If you have any doubt, feel free to ask and need not to say sorry, yaar. I've been seeing for anything you say, you are immediately saying, sir, I'm sorry. Arey need not to say sorry, bachche. So what was happening? Brahmins were performing rituals, and the another class of people, they were called as Rajas. But don't confuse Rajas as kings like we have seen. They didn't have the rights to collect taxes. They didn't maintain armies, and even this position of Raja was not hereditary. It was not like that ke Raja ka beta hi Raja bane. Rajas were the position that changed. Sometimes people who composed hymns described themselves as Aryas. Again, we need to remember who were Aryas. We can be asked this direct question. Who were Aryas as per Rig Veda? So as per Rig Veda, Aryas were the people who composed these hymns, what we called as what suktas. So those who composed these suktas or hymns were the Aryas. They were reciting hymns, they were performing rituals, and there was another class of people who was totally opposite. So one class was Aryas. What the Aryas were doing? Aryas were these Aryas. They were composing hymns, they were performing rituals and sacrifices, and the other group that was totally opposite, they were not performing any rituals or sacrifices. They were called as dasas or dasyus. Sir, each and every word is important. Aryas, people who composed hymns, they performed sacrifices, and there were people who were not composing any hymns, who were not performing any sacrifices. They were known as dasyus or dasas, and this was mentioned in Rig Veda. Then the important discovery of this time is something known as megaliths. The stone boulder, this big stone like structure that you are seeing here is called as megalith. Have a closer look. This is a place where people were buried, and there is one drain like structure. What was happening was, if somebody was buried, an outlet was kept, because I will tell you in shortly that it was found that the entire families were buried together. So it's not the case that everybody was dying together, or it was not the case that if one person has died, entire family was buried. So what used to happen, if somebody has died, he was buried inside the stones, and an opening and an outlet was kept open, so that if somebody else from that family dies, he is also buried at the same place. So we need to remember megaliths. What was megaliths? These were the stone boulder structure which was used to bury people. They used to mark the burial sites. See, once you bury somebody, it becomes really difficult to come to the same position next time. So you need to mark certain areas that it was the place where we buried. So that's why these large stone boulders were arranged around. No issues, Kirti. So these large stone boulders, they were arranged around the burial site so that people can identify where they buried. This practice was used in Deccan and Kashmir. So you can see Deccan area, almost southern part. Kashmir is northernmost point. So you can see the connection. Such type of burials were taking place in Deccan also. Such type of burials were taking place in Kashmir also. Some megaliths, these megaliths or these burial sites were on the surface and some were underground. We need to remember all these things, guys. Some of them were underground, some of them were on the surface. Some dead were buried with distinctive pots which were called as black and red ware. So they were making pottery. So people of Rig Vedic age had the knowledge of pottery. They used black and red ware. How we got to know? Because when we found the burials of Rig Vedic time, the skeletons were found buried with pots. Black and red colored pots were placed there. So if somebody asked you, do the age of Rig Vedic times people knew about pottery? Yes, they knew about pottery. People were buried along with several objects. So they were buried along with several objects. The objects were chosen probably depending upon the status of person of the dead. So people were buried. There were these pots placed, and these pots were filled with certain things. So depending upon the status of people, for example, if somebody was a leader, somebody was a rich man, his pots used to contain gold, jewelry, precious stones. But if somebody was a common man, so they would bury him with food items or something like this. Families were usually buried together. So as I told you that these megaliths or these burial sites had the openings from where later if somebody else dies from that family, he could be brought in. Sometimes the burials were within the houses only. When the burials were found inside the house only, it's not that every time people were buried outside only. At times people were buried within their house only. Vessels that probably contained food and water were placed with the dead. In most of the cases, with the common man this was happening. Then when man was buried, there were some vessels, there were some pots that were kept in which had food and water. We didn't find the traces of food and water. You cannot expect food and water to stay there for thousands of years. We can just we are just assuming it. Archaeologists have found the seeds of wheat. Note it down, guys. They found the traces of wheat, barley, rice, pulses, millets, peas, and sesame. So they found the traces of these crops. It means people of Rigveda were practicing agriculture, and agriculture started during Indus Valley civilization. Only I told you that we found the miniature plow in during Indus Valley civilization. In Inam Gaon, people were buried with their heads towards the north. This is important, sir. A small village in Maharashtra. It is called as Inam Gaon. Inam Gaon has its traces to later period later than Indus Valley civilization. So this is a place called Inam Gaon, which is in Maharashtra. People were buried, and they were buried with their head towards the north. Till today, in many places, this tradition is followed. When somebody dies, he is made to lie down with his head towards the north. In most of the villages, and still in many places, if somebody is sleeping with his head towards the north, it is considered inauspicious. You are not allowed to sleep with your head towards the north, because this is the position. Head towards the north means person has died. Bones of number of animals were found there. This is again very important. They found bones of number of animals, and these bones had certain cut marks. Bones were not intact, they had certain cut marks which showed that animals were eaten as food. So animals were cut into pieces and they were eaten as food. That's why the bones had certain cut marks. Again, we need to remember that Rig Veda or Vedic time texts tell us that people were consuming animals as food. So cut marks were found on the bones of the animals. The bones which were found of the animals were cattle, buffalo, goat, sheep, dog, horse, ass, pig, sambar, spotted deer, black buck, antelope, hare, mongoose. Yes, you should consider each and everything in your notes. See, you go and have a look at the NCERT, you will find n number of things, but here what I am doing, I am limiting the things. So you need to have these things with you, you need to note them down. So these were the animals that we found. We found fish, we found crab, turtle, crocodile, birds, mongoose, hare, antelope, black buck. There were evidences of fruits such as bear, amla, jamun, dates, and varieties of berries were collected. So, are we clear with things up till here or not? What was happening during Rig Vedic time? What were the things practiced? What were the birds? What were the cattle they were found in those times? We need to remember these things. Are we clear till here? So that is the discussion about chapter 4. We'll just have the overview. So the term Aryas were used, were the people who composed hymns, and they called Aryas themselves. And opposite to Aryas were Dasyas. People had black and red wear. These distinctive pots of black and red color were there. Brahmins or priests, they used to perform rituals. Then there were Dasas or Dasyus who were opponents of the Aryas. Like Aryas were reciting hymns, they were composing hymns, but Dasyus were not. Aryas were performing sacrifices, Dasyas were not. And remember, these Dasas and Dasyus would be known as slave in the later period. You must have heard about the Dasi system or slave system. So these Dasyus or Dasas were considered to be the slaves in the times to come. Then we talked about Megalith, a stone boulder structure which marked the burial site is referred as Megalith. We use the term Sukta. Sukta, the hymns of Vedas were called Suktas, which translated, which meant Veda, well said. So when somebody was reciting Suktas, it meant that it is well said. So hymns of Vedas were called as Suktas. That is the overall summary of chapter number 4. Are we clear till here? My dear friends, are we clear till here? Are we clear till here or not? Any doubt up till here? So with this, our chapter 4 also comes to an end. Any doubt you can ask me right now. So if things are clear, I'll proceed further. So that's all for today's class. As I tell you every time that as a UPSC aspirant, you must be having n number of doubts. So you can get your doubts cleared by the Unacademy Doubt Darbar. You need to enroll with us in our Plus and Iconic subscription, and you have to use this code IAS Icons. Don't forget to use this code IAS Icons, because this code will get you maximum discounts. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, you need to subscribe. Apart from that, you can join us on Telegram, like and share the videos, and as I request you every time, please drop your valuable comments in the comment section. This gives me a lot of motivation. Thank you very much. All the best. Keep working hard. Bye bye. Take care. Jai Hind.